Welcome back to Pencil Paper Plot. You know, the YouTube channel where we really dig deep into the art of storytelling? But today, we're kind of switching things up a little. We're trading in our usual scripts and books for something a little different.
Yeah, we're talking box office trends.
Exactly. We're going to be looking at the numbers. What can they tell us about what audiences want? You know, what kind of stories really click?
I think there's a lot to unpack there, and we've got just a ton of reports and box office figures.
Yeah, even some juicy little behind-the-scenes tidbits.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And, I think one of the biggest things that's jumping out right away is just the complete dominance of family films.
It's like a family film frenzy at the box office right now. From November to February, they brought in, get this, 64% of box office revenue.
It's a lot.
That's $1.4 billion.
Right.
That is a huge message from audiences.
It makes you wonder, what's really driving that trend? Is it escapism? Are people looking for something heartwarming?
I think it's got to be a little bit of everything. We're living in kind of uncertain times. Maybe people are just looking for comfort.
Yeah.
The familiar happy endings, those relatable characters, stories that the whole family can enjoy.
Yeah, and speaking of familiar, we can't forget about nostalgia. You look at something like Moana 2, it's just capitalizing on that love for the original. The audience that grew up with the first Moana is ready for the sequel.
Yeah, nostalgia is definitely a powerful thing. But it's not just these big sequels, in franchises.
Yeah.
Even movies based on things that maybe aren't as well known or doing well.
Right.
Like Dogman. It came out in early February.
Which is usually kind of a dead zone for movies.
Total dead zone.
Yeah.
But it still did really well.
Yeah. And it actually even outperformed Captain Underpants, which came out in the summer, early summer primetime. So that tells you something right there.
It really does. Good storytelling can find its audience no matter when it comes out.
Exactly, and I think that's what Dogman really shows us. If you've got source material that people already love, like the Daft Pilkey books, put it together with good marketing, word of mouth gets out, and it can overcome that bad release date.
It's proof that quality storytelling still really matters.
It does, but it's not all, heartwarming family stuff that's doing well. We're seeing a lot of interesting genre blends, too. And I'm not talking, the typical action comedy or sci-fi thriller. This is something else.
Okay, so give me an example. What are you thinking?
Romantic comedy slasher.
Okay, that's where it gets interesting. Like Hard Eyes. A serial killer going after couples on Valentine's Day. That's pretty dark.
It is, but it's also a romantic comedy.
Yeah, it's a really wild mix.
Yeah.
But it's working. The critics are loving it. It's clever. It's funny. It's scary. Some are even calling it like a mashup of Scream and When Harry Met Sally.
Talk about a unique concept.
So what do you think? What's behind this? Is it just that it's so different? Or is there something more to it?
I think people are hungry for something new, something that shakes things up a bit.
Makes sense.
And Hard Eyes definitely does that. But it's also how it plays with what we expect. We're so used to romantic comedies being one thing and slashers being totally different. So when they come together like this,
it's unexpected.
Right. It's a surprise, and people like that.
But not every experiment works out that way. You look at Love Hurts, another romantic comedy, but with action. Guy Kwan, Ariana DeBose.
And it just flopped.
Total flop.
Yeah, it just shows you throwing two genres together isn't a guarantee for success. It's got to be done well. You have to find the right balance and weave them together so it feels natural.
You have to tell a good story.
Exactly, and ultimately that's what matters.
So as storytellers, what can we take away from all this? What can we learn from the hits and misses?
I think it tells us not to be afraid to try new things, to push the boundaries, subvert expectations. But don't forget about the story you're trying to tell.
It all comes back to the story.
Yeah, the genre blend should serve the story, not the other way around.
Okay, so we talked family films, we talked genre blending. But let's zoom out a little bit. Look at the global box office. And you can't do that without talking about China.
Especially during Chinese New Year.
Huge.
This year, their box office hit an all-time high, $1.3 billion. That's more than even before the pandemic.
Wow. So the Chinese film industry isn't just recovering, it's booming.
It really is.
So you got movies like Ne Zha 2 and Detective Chinatown 1900 making hundreds of millions of dollars. Just shows you how big that market is.
And those films are finding audiences outside of China, too.
Right. So it makes you think, how is this growth in China going to change what kinds of stories get told? Not just in China, but globally.
Yeah, that's a big question. Will we see more collaborations between Hollywood and China? Are we going to see more stories that appeal to both Western and Eastern audiences?
That's a really interesting thing to watch. And speaking of things changing, there's a lot happening behind the scenes, too. shakeups that give us a peek into how the power is shifting between studios and streaming platforms and even theater chains.
Yeah, it reminds us that the business side of storytelling is always changing.
Yeah.
You got to stay informed and be ready to adapt.
Exactly. So let's dive into some of these shakeups, starting with Disney.
Disney, the big guy. They're actually having some interesting problems, even though their profits are up. Their streaming service, Disney Plus, it's losing subscribers.
Wait, so more money but fewer subscribers? It seems like it shouldn't work that way.
I know it's weird, right? But it shows you how much things are changing, especially with streaming.
Yeah, it's like the Wild West out there.
Yeah.
So many services fighting for our attention.
Right, and after all this crazy growth, streaming's getting kind of crowded.
So people are being more picky about what they pay for, especially with the economy not doing so great. Makes you wonder if the streaming bubble is about to pop, or at least like spring a leak or something.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, we've already seen some mergers. Warner Bros. Discovery put HBO Max and Discovery Plus together. And even Disney's cutting back on how much they spend on shows and movies.
So they're rethinking their whole streaming strategy.
It seems like it. Could be a sign of things to come for other streaming companies, too. Who knows?
Definitely something to keep an eye on. And while we're talking about shifts in power, let's talk about what's happening at Alamo Drafthouse.
That's a really interesting one because it shows you how things work between the people who work at theaters and the people who run them, especially now that Sony Pictures owns Alamo Drafthouse.
Right. And the union in New York is saying Alamo isn't playing fair. They're saying the company used layoffs to put pressure on the union during contract negotiations.
Yeah, that's a pretty serious accusation. And it could affect other theater chains, too. People are watching to see what happens.
It makes you think about the future of unions in this industry. Can they protect workers when things are changing so fast? I mean, behind all these box office numbers, there are real people whose jobs are on the line.
Absolutely. And it's not just labor disputes that are changing things. AMC, the biggest chain in the U.S., they're making their A-list subscription more expensive, but you also get more with it.
So they're giving you more movies each week.
Right. It's a smart move. They're building on something that's already popular and getting people back into theaters more often.
Yeah, because it's got to be tough to compete with streaming. It's so easy and cheap to just stay home and watch something.
Exactly. So this is a way to make going to the theater more appealing. It's good for AMC and it's good for people who love seeing movies on the big screen.
Win-win.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's switch gears a little bit, talk about something a little different, adapting books into movies. Specifically, this woman, Elizabeth Gabler, who's the president of Sony 3000 Pictures. She's got a really amazing track record.
Yeah, she's the one behind Life of Pi, The Devil Wears Prada, Where the Crawdads Sing. Huge movies.
And they all started as books. It's really interesting how she can pick books that will make good movies. And then she puts together the right team to make it happen. It's got to be really hard to adapt a book into a movie.
Oh, it's super challenging. How do you stay true to the book but also make it work as a movie? You can't just film someone reading the book.
Right. You have to find a way to show those emotions and ideas that make the book so good, but you have to do it in a way that works for film.
Exactly. Sometimes those changes can actually make the story even better.
You add something new or make a moment more powerful because you're seeing it instead of just reading it.
Right. So a good adaptation does both. It honors the book, but it's also its own thing. So what's her secret? Why is she so good at this?
I think it's a few things. She can spot a story that will work as a movie. And she knows how to find the right director and screenwriter. You know the people who can bring that story to life. Plus, she really cares about these projects. You can tell she's passionate about them. And that makes a difference.
It shows in the final product. It's like she's a master chef putting together the perfect ingredients. And then she lets them do their thing. She gives them the space and the support to create something amazing.
It's a skill we could all learn from, no matter what kind of story we're trying to tell. Okay, so we've covered a lot today. Family films, genre mashups, the global market, all the stuff happening behind the scenes adaptations. What does it all mean? What's the big takeaway about storytelling in film right now?
I think it's an industry that's changing really fast, with all the new technology and audiences that want different things. And the global market is just getting bigger and bigger.
It's like the lines are getting blurry between movies and streaming and even video games.
Right. And audiences are more diverse and they want more. It's a tough time to be a storyteller, but it's also really exciting. There's so much potential.
So where do we go from here? What kinds of stories are going to grab people's attention in the future? What are you excited about?
I think we're going to see more voices that we haven't heard from before. Stories from communities that haven't always been represented. Stories that challenge how we think and show us new perspectives.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, we need more stories that show us what the world is really like. I mean, all the different people and experiences, stories that make us think and feel things and help us understand each other better.
Absolutely. And I think we'll also see more stories about technology, how it's changing our lives, the good and the bad.
It's everywhere, right? It's changing everything.
Yeah, I mean, we're already seeing movies and TV shows that use virtual augmented reality, even AI.
It's like we're just getting started. Who knows what's next? Makes you wonder what's going to happen to storytelling.
It's an exciting time to be a storyteller. But, you know, even with all this new technology, the basics of good storytelling are still the same.
We still need characters that we care about, plots that keep us hooked, and themes that mean something to us. And most importantly, stories that have something to say about the world.
Stories that make us laugh and cry, make us think, and ultimately help us feel more connected.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time to bring it back to you guys, our awesome viewers. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. What really stood out to you today? What trends are you excited about? What do you think the future of storytelling in film looks like?
Let us know in the comments. We love hearing what you think and having these conversations about movies and storytelling. It's what this channel is all about.
And if you're as passionate about all this as we are,
hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. That way you won't miss any of our deep dives.
we've got so much more coming your way. Script breakdowns, author interviews, all kinds of cool stuff. We're going to keep exploring the world of storytelling.
Until then.
Keep being creative and remember, a good story can change the world.
And that's a wrap on our deep dive into box office trends.
Thanks for joining us.
We'll see you next time for another deep dive.